motorcycle clubs, they have this definite allure, don't they? That mix of freedom, the open road, but also this really intense brotherhood.
Yeah.
Sometimes with a bit of mystery, maybe even danger.
Definitely. And today we're diving into one of the big ones, the Mongols Motorcycle Club, also called the Mongol Brotherhood or Mongol Nation.
Right. We got some interesting source material here, excerpts mainly detailing their history, their structure, all that stuff.
And our mission really is to pull out the most important, the most fascinating bits for you, our listeners, give you the core insights into this international outlaw motorcycle club.
Yeah, we want you to get a solid handle on it, quickly, thoroughly, without feeling like you're wading through endless pages.
Exactly, so you feel informed.
Okay, let's jump in. Where does the story even start?
Yeah.
What was the spark for the Mongols?
The documents point to December 5th, 1969, Montebello, California.
Okay, 69. So they've been around quite a while.
Over 50 years, yeah. Which is pretty significant in that world.
Montebello. Got it. And who was involved right at the beginning? How many people?
Just 10 founders originally.
10. Okay.
And what's interesting is that apparently a majority of them were Vietnam veterans.
Oh, really? Vietnam vets?
Yeah, which kind of suggests maybe it was about finding that camaraderie again. That shared experience they had in service. That kind of bond is powerful.
Yeah, that makes sense. That veteran connection definitely adds a layer. Who were the key figures leading the charge early on?
Well, the first national president was a guy named Louis Costello.
Costello, okay.
And apparently he's the one who chose the name Mongols after Genghis Khan and the Mongol Empire.
Wow, that's a statement. Naming yourselves after Genghis Khan.
It really is, isn't it? It signals power, strength, maybe fearlessness right from the start.
No kidding. And who else?
The original sergeant-at-arms, sort of the enforcer keeping order, was Alfonso Big Al Us. Also a Vietnam vet, he was with the 101st Airborne.
Okay, so strong military ties in the early leadership. Now, the source material mentioned the specific reason they formed, something related to another big club.
Yes, and this seems pretty crucial. The reported reason is that they started as an alternative for Hispanic bikers, mainly from East LA.
An alternative because...
Because they apparently felt excluded from joining the Hells Angels, specifically because of their race.
Okay. So it wasn't just about riding motorcycles. It was tied up in identity, belonging, pushing back against perceived discrimination.
Exactly. That seems to be a core part of their origin story.
That's a really important piece of context.
Yeah.
And when did they officially get that outlaw label?
They voted themselves an outlaw club in 1974.
1974.
Yeah.
And that outlaw thing often shown by the 1% patch, right?
Right. It generally means they reject mainstream society's rules, follow their own code, their own loyalties. They're the 1% operating outside the norms of the other 99% of riders.
Okay. So, started in Southern California, clear reason, adopted the outlaw identity early. How did they go from just 10 guys in Montebello to, well, this huge international thing they are now?
Well, early on, the sources mentioned they grew by recruiting inmates. Specifically mentioned is the California Men's Colony in San Luis Obispo.
Recruiting from prison. Okay, that tells you something about the early pool, perhaps.
It does. And within their first decade, they really spread out across Southern California. Chapters popped up in LA, the San Gabriel Valley, San Fernando Valley, Long Beach, San Diego, Bakersfield.
So pretty rapid expansion in their home state.
Yeah, they established a strong foothold pretty quickly.
And now, what are the numbers like today, roughly?
The estimates for full-patched members, the official members, are somewhere between 1,000 and 2,000 worldwide.
Worldwide, so not just California anymore.
Oh, far from it. They now have chapters in 17 countries.
17? Wow. Can you list those?
Sure. Let's see. Australia, Belgium, Brazil, Canada, England, France, Germany, Israel, Italy, Malaysia, Mexico, the Netherlands, Norway, Singapore, Sweden, Thailand, and the U.S., of course.
That's genuinely global. So where do they fit in the hierarchy of outlaw clubs?
Globally, they're usually ranked as the 5th largest. That's after the Hells Angels, Banditos, Outlaws, and Pagans.
The big 5 in the U.S., basically.
Right. But it shifts a bit depending on where you look. In Australia, for example, they talk about the Big 6, and the Mongols are included there, along with the Banditos, Hells Angels, Comanchero, Finks, and Rebels.
Okay, so definitely a major player on the international scene. Now, something the sources really highlighted was this conflict, this feud.
Yeah, the feud with the Hells Angels, that's a huge part of their story. It reportedly kicked off way back in 1977.
77, so it's been going on for decades.
Decades. Intense, often violent rivalry, mostly about territory, dominance, the usual stuff in that world.
And the sources mentioned something about how they divided up California. a sort of agreement.
Yeah, it suggests that back in the 80s, there was this kind of unofficial understanding. The Hells Angels basically ceded a lot of Southern California to the Mongols.
Really? They just gave it up.
Well, the idea was, in return, the Hells Angels would keep their dominance over Northern California. It was like drawing a line, maybe to try and cool things down a bit, reduce the direct clashes, at least for a while.
A strategic truce, almost.
Yeah.
Okay, let's shift to visuals. How do you spot a Mongol? What about their insignia, their colors?
Their patch is really distinctive. It's a caricature of a Mongol warrior, supposedly Genghis Khan.
Okay.
But he's got a top knot, sunglasses, and bell-bottoms, riding a motorcycle.
Bell-bottoms. On Genghis Khan. It's memorable.
It really is. It's unique, kind of funny in a way. Definitely sticks with you.
And they actually protect this image legally.
Oh, yeah. It's trademarked, registered with the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office.
Okay.
And that trademark became super important in some big legal fights they had later on. The colors, that term, refers to that main logo, plus all the other patches they wear on their vests.
Right. And those other patches, they tell a story, too.
Exactly. They show things like the members' rank, their chapter location, club slogans, and that 1% patch we talked about, signifying the outlaw status.
And the color scheme.
Strictly black and white. Very stark.
Black and white, classic. What about the big patches on the back, the rockers?
Right, the rockers. You earn those in stages. It shows your progress.
Oh, that's that way.
First, a prospect earns the bottom rocker that says the chapter location. Then they get the main club logo in the middle. And finally, when they become a full member, a full patch, they get the top rocker with the club name Mongols.
So it's a very visible sign of where you stand in the club.
Totally. Shows you've put in the work, earned your place.
Now, there were mentions of some other patches, ones with potentially darker meanings.
Yes. According to law enforcement sources, and it's important to stress that's the source, there's a skull and crossbones patch. They allege it means the wearer has killed for the club.
Wow.
And similarly, there's this RFFN tattoo, stands for Respect Few, Fear None. Law enforcement claims that's reserved for members who've committed violence specifically against a Hells Angel.
Again, that's the law enforcement interpretation.
Correct. These are serious claims linked to those symbols by authorities.
Very serious. And I remember reading something about Raiders gear, like the football team.
Yeah, that's an interesting tactic. Apparently, in some places where wearing club colors is banned, members have been seen wearing Las Vegas Raiders clothing.
Why the Raiders?
The idea seems to be that the black and silver colors are close enough to be recognizable within the club culture, a way to show affiliation without technically breaking the rules against wearing their official patches or gang colors.
Huh. Finding a loophole, basically. Clever. Okay, so beyond the visuals, what about their philosophy, their mottos?
They have a few core mottos that pop up. Live Mongol, Die Mongol, LMDM really emphasizes that lifelong loyalty. Then there's Mongols Forever, Forever Mongols, MFFM. Same idea, that lasting brotherhood. And the one we mentioned with the tattoo, Respect Few, Fear None, RFFN. That definitely captures that defiant, maybe confrontational attitude.
LMDM, MFFM, RFFN.
Yeah.
Got it. And they also call themselves
Mongol Nation, Mongol Brotherhood, again, reinforcing that collective identity, that sense of being a distinct group.
It all paints a picture.
Yeah.
And the sources mentioned a fight song sounded pretty intense.
Oh, yeah. The lyrics are, well, they're explicit. They don't mince words. They talk about being Mongol raiders, being quick to fight, stuff like that. It's very raw, very aggressive.
Right. Definitely leaning into that outlaw image.
Completely. It leaves no doubt about how they see themselves, or at least the image they want to project.
Okay. Now, you mentioned legal battles over the patch earlier. That sounds like a really big deal for them.
Huge deal. They were locked in this long, drawn-out fight with the Department of Justice and the ATF, specifically over the right to wear and own their patch.
And how did that end?
Ultimately, the Mongols won. They successfully defended their right to their logo, their colors, which is massive for them because that patch is their identity, you know.
And this wasn't just a small case, right? The government really went after the patch itself.
They absolutely did. In 2015, federal prosecutors tried to use civil forfeiture laws, basically, laws that let the government seize assets tied to crime to take away all rights to the Mongols' emblems. The goal was to stop anyone from wearing them, period.
To erase the symbol.
Pretty much. But a federal judge, David O'Carter, shut that down in September 2015. He dismissed that part of the case.
On what grounds?
Concerns about the First Amendment, freedom of expression and association, and the Eighth Amendment, which prohibits excessive fines or punishments. Seizing their core symbol was seen as going too far.
That's fascinating. Freedom of speech even applying to a motorcycle club's patch.
Well, the legal arguments were complex, but yeah, and it didn't stop there. Later in 2019, a jury actually did initially rule that the government could strip the club of its brand.
So a different outcome.
Temporarily. But that ruling was then challenged, and a higher court, the Central District of California Court, basically said no. They confirmed the earlier reasoning, taking the trademark would violate the First and Eighth Amendments.
So multiple attempts by the government, multiple times the court said no, you can't take their patch away in the U.S.
That seems to be the bottom line in the U.S., yeah. The right to wear the patch seems protected, but that's not the case everywhere.
Oh, where have restrictions stuck?
In New Zealand, for example, a law went into effect in April 2020 that specifically bans Mongols members from wearing their club insignia inside government buildings.
Government buildings specifically, like
Yeah.
courts, offices.
Exactly. Courts, social welfare offices, libraries, places like that.
And the thinking behind that kind of ban.
The stated goal is basically to reclaim those public spaces, make it clear the club doesn't own them, and also to try and discourage recruitment in those official environments. Limit their visible presence and influence.
Makes sense from that perspective.
Okay.
Let's switch tracks a bit. Inside the club, who gets to be a Mongol? Is it exclusive?
It's definitely restricted to men only. That's consistent.
Men only.
Within the U.S., the sources say they typically allow Hispanic, Native American, and white men. African Americans are reportedly excluded.
Okay. Is that the same internationally?
Not necessarily. It seems more diverse elsewhere. In Australia, membership is apparently mostly Anglo-Celtic and Middle Eastern folks. And in Germany, they seem to recruit heavily from Arab and Kurdish communities.
So the ethnic makeup varies quite a bit depending on the country.
It seems so. But one thing that is consistent, a key requirement everywhere. You have to own a Harley-Davidson motorcycle.
The Harley rule. That's non-negotiable.
Apparently so. And you don't just join. You have to go through a probationary period as a prospect.
A trial period.
Yeah, basically. They check you out, see if you're loyal, committed, if you fit in, before you get your full patches.
And once you're in, what's expected? What are the obligations?
Standard stuff, mostly. Paying monthly dues, attending chapter meetings regularly. That's where they handle club business, make decisions, reinforce the bonds.
And they actually have written rules, like a handbook.
Surprisingly, yes. There's mention of a 70-page constitution. It supposedly even includes 10 commandments for the club.
70 pages. Wow. What's in there?
Well, interestingly, it reportedly forbids members from using drugs, and it mandates expulsion if a member gets convicted of a serious felony.
Wait, forbids drug use and serious crime. That seems counterintuitive for an outlaw club.
It does, doesn't it? It clashes with the public image, but suggests there's an internal code they at least aspire to or claim to.
That's genuinely surprising. How is the whole thing structured? Who's in charge?
There's a central body called the Mother Chapter. It's made up of the national officers, led by a national president.
And they run everything.
Pretty much. The Mother Chapter has authority over all the other chapters, all the members worldwide. They handle applications, collect domain fees, settle disputes.
A clear hierarchy then. And where is this Mother Chapter based?
It's always been in Southern California. Started in Montebello, moved to Commerce for a while, and currently it's in West Covina.
Still close to their roots. And you mentioned fees. The local chapters pay up to this central chapter.
Yes, each chapter sends dues to the Mother Chapter. Now, law enforcement alleges that money funds club activities and, significantly, pays for members' legal defenses.
But the club denies that part.
Right. The club publicly says they don't cover legal fees for members, so that's a point of disagreement there.
Okay. Any other associated groups, like theater clubs?
Yes, they have an official support club called the Raiders MC. Support clubs often do various things for the main club, kind of like auxiliaries.
Raiders MC. Got it. Okay, so we've got the history, the symbols, the rules, the structure. Now we have to talk about the elephant in the room, the crime allegations.
Right. This is where they get most of the headlines. Major law enforcement agencies, the U.S. Department of Justice, Australian Federal Police, Europol, they've all officially designated the Mongols as an organized crime group.
Not just a club, but an organized crime group.
That's the official designation, based on alleged involvement in a whole range of criminal activities.
What are they accused of?
The list is long and serious. Money laundering, robbery, extortion, gun crimes, murder, assault. Pretty much the whole gamut of serious criminal enterprise.
That's a heavy list. But the club leadership pushes back on this.
They do. The current international president, David Santillan, has flat out denied the club itself is a criminal organization.
And their lawyers.
Their lawyers claim they've actually changed their internal rules, their code of conduct, specifically to weed out drug abusers and convicted criminals. So they're trying, at least publicly, to project a cleaner image.
It's that constant tension, isn't it? The official allegations versus the club's self-portrayal. And the sources had a very recent kind of shocking example involving law enforcement itself.
Yeah, this just happened in March 2024. A sheriff's deputy from San Bernardino County, Christopher Bingham, was arrested.
A deputy. Arrested for what?
He's accused of actually being an active member of the Mongols, which is obviously a huge conflict.
Wow. A cop in the club?
Allegedly, yes. He was reportedly caught with two other alleged members, had an unregistered gun, and was wearing Mongols gear, including a shirt with an explicit anti-Hells Angels slogan, Cilium, another club acronym, and a black M ring, which is a known Mongol symbol.
That's incredible. A law enforcement officer allegedly part of this group, seemingly involved in the rivalry too, that adds a whole other layer of complexity.
It really does raises huge questions about conflicts of interest, infiltration, integrity, all of it.
Well, we certainly covered a lot of ground. From the founding by excluded veterans, the growth, that iconic patch, the internal rules, some surprising ones, the legal fights, and these very serious crime allegations and controversies.
Absolutely. It's a journey from a specific origin in Southern California to this global entity with a really complex, often contradictory public face, fiercely protective of their symbols, but constantly under scrutiny from law enforcement worldwide.
So for everyone listening, we hope this deep dive gave you a solid, usable understanding of the Mongols MC based on the info we reviewed. It's a glimpse into a world that usually stays in the shadows, with its own codes, its own wars, its own ongoing story.
And it leaves you thinking, doesn't it? What drives people to these kinds of intense, tight-knit groups? How does an organization like this balance its internal identity with the way the outside world, especially law enforcement, sees it? And maybe the biggest question, how does society handle that line between freedom of association and concerns about public safety when groups are linked, rightly or wrongly, to criminal acts? Lots to mull over there, considering all the different perspectives we've touched on.